Welcome to the Sunday Mind Emission on the Toad Cam in New York, Toad City, as we're approaching Halloween. Scary reading. Okay, this is a little break from all that NLP stuff, but I think there's an important connection here, and the connection is this. Our psychic experiences, what we think of as our psychological reality from day to day, the world we're living in, is very much shaped, profoundly shaped by large, slow-moving, but very deep environmental trends and social trends. And we just think we're going about our business, living our lives, being the people we are. But the people we are and the way we react and the way we think and what we believe and what we're motivated to do is very, very much shaped by what's happening around us in the world at the macro level. So, on with the show. First book that I would recommend, I would really recommend, if you want a scary book, it's orange, so I guess that qualifies as a Halloween color, orange and black. 6 Degrees, and this breaks the future of the world climate down into 6 models or 6 scenarios of 1 degree shift in centigrade. So that would be from 2 degrees roughly, 2 degrees Fahrenheit to 14 degrees Fahrenheit, more or less. And at the mildest end of the spectrum, if we, by the end of this century, we raise our global temperature by a mere 2 degrees Fahrenheit, which is barely perceptible, really, but that's the mean global temperature, we will already experience pretty significant changes. If global temperature increases by 6 degrees centigrade, or roughly 14 degrees Fahrenheit, by the end of the century, we will experience an environment which is very similar in very short order to what is known as the Permian end mass extinction. The Permian end mass extinction was the biggest and nastiest and totalist die-off of all living organisms on the face of the earth. It was, to put it mildly, real fucked up. So if we get a Permian end mass extinction, again, we're pretty much fried, you know. And I do think very much, I believe very much that we are emotionally, collectively, unconsciously reacting. And in many ways, we're reacting by mass denial and by retreat into what we would call regression. We are emotionally regressing into more primitive beliefs and more primitive attitudes and forms of stubbornness and refusal to accept. I don't think that people are that intrinsically unintelligent. I think that what we're seeing happening in a lot of people is basic psychological defense mechanisms, recognizing that some very, very profound change, which we will have little control over once it reaches a critical degree of impact on our lives and on our weather, our climate. And that fear, that recognition, produces a kind of collective neurotic or collective mass response, a collective insanity of denial or refusal, insistence on other forms of faith-based solutions. And I'm not against faith and I'm not against religion, but I'm saying that people can quickly find themselves abandoning rationality and clinging to less rational or sub-rational solutions as a way of maintaining their psychic equilibrium. The other book, if you want to read something, this has been somewhat contested by people in the energy industry, but nonetheless, I think it's real vital reading, and it's really hairy, scary, global stuff. Crude World by Peter Maas, The Violent Twilight of Oil. And Maas is pretty much saying that we are moving toward a time when we have passed the peak, well past the peak of peak oil extraction, and oil reserves, and there are oil industry executives who say that that's not true, that we're going to find vast quantities of natural gas that we can liquefy and gain our energy supplies. So many of the ways that we respond and we deal with this stuff is actually covered in John Casty's very interesting book, Mood Matters. And he looks at collective behavior, including market behavior, popular culture, things like that, very much like Robert Prechter does. How do people collectively react? How does the collective or mass psychology respond to these changes? So if you have this, actually a triple whammy coming up, there's a real triple whammy. One is a potential mass climate change, and do read 6 Degrees if you want to just have a nice scary story that will make Stephen King look like a walk in the park. Read the last few chapters of 6 Degrees. We have the potential of a total reconfiguration of our energy economy, and pretty much everything that happens in the world depends on energy. So if our energy supplies are undercut or we don't have them, a lot of other things stop rather quickly too. And this does result in mass behavior, mass psychology, collective tastes, etc. So you might want to check in with Robert Prechter. I think he's got some books on a field he calls socioeconomics. Socioeconomics would be very, very good to start getting wise to. And he wrote some books too. I don't have them handy, but I do have John Casty's very interesting book, Mood Matters. The later chapters on Fibonacci ratios and gold and things like that are of some interest, but I would really recommend starting to become aware of the potential futures when we have the third factor coming in, which I didn't discuss yet, which is the global aging. We're going to have a global aging of the world population and mass aging, even in places like China. So we're really looking at what could be a very complex and very tough dynamic of an aging, graying world, declining potential food supplies or mass food inflation, thanks perhaps to climate change, and a very, very much harder to obtain or more expensive fuel, which needs to be done with the support of probably the most disgusting dictators and repulsively under badly managed regimes around. So it looks like when you put these three factors together, we could be coming in for a real collective psycho whopper in the next 20 years.